this book, this big giant guide that I had,
Yeah.
it has too many choices and little bitty words and not written by locals, written by
Yes.
people who visited there, who
Yeah.
probably never even visited the place that they're talking about. So then I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a tour guide that's about New Orleans,
Yep.
that is limited in its scope,
Yeah.
written by a local. So that's what I did.
Welcome back to the AudioLife podcast, where we tell your story in your voice. I'm your host today, Carrie Purcell, and today I'm joined by Richard Bienvenu. Now, Richard was born and raised in New Orleans, which we'll talk about today. He is an author, a radio host, a guitarist. He studied film and theater in his undergrad and master's degrees and has directed an award-winning short film. He's also produced his own music. He's published 3 books. We'll talk about at least one of them today. You can also hear him weekly on his radio show, Completely New Orleans. Now, his bio doesn't stop there, so I'm glad I have the next hour to talk to Richard and learn more and share more with you as well. So, Richard, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited to chat with you today. There's so much that we're going to cover. I usually like to start these conversations by going way back to the beginning. I gave everybody a hint at where we're going, I didn't include everything in the bio that I could have, so we have a lot to cover. But can you just start by telling us where you were born, and is there a story behind your name?
Well, I was born in New Orleans, and in New Orleans, we don't say New Orleans. The only time we say New Orleans is in a song, like, do you know what it means in Miss New Orleans? And also, interestingly enough, we live in Orleans Parish, so we call our parish Orleans, but city people, people who live here usually do not say New Orleans. So we say New Orleans, but it's fine if you want to do that.
So what about Nolans? Is it ever Nolans?
People, I don't know if people really say that. It kind of maybe sounds like as we might go Nolans like that. I don't think they say Nolans. They'll say Nolans.
Yeah.
Kind of New Orleans like that. But so maybe it sounds like Nolans. Mainly people who live in the city do not say New Orleans. But as I said, it's fine that you said that.
Well, I'm definitely going to be adding the outsider perspective, joining from Toronto, Canada here. Actually, today I'm joining from Quebec, to be fair.
Yeah.
But joining up in Canada. I've had the pleasure of visiting your city a couple of times, but, preparing for this conversation with you today, I did get to dig into this book, which Richard wrote, your own personal, I'm just going to say it my way, your own personal New Orleans tour, 7 things you must do to have a fabulous time in the Crescent City. Richard, between his writing, his radio show, and his personal upbringing there, is a resident expert. So we're going to talk about the city a fair bit in our conversation, I'm guessing.
Well, and I think one of the questions you asked is about my name. So
yes,
of course, Bienvenu means welcome, right? It's usually spelled with an E at the end, but almost everybody in Louisiana name is Bienvenu spells it without the E. And my father was from a little town called St. Martinville, and St. Martinville is considered the center of the Cajun culture. However, we are not Cajun. Our family came directly from France in the 1700s. There were 3 Bienvenu brothers, and they came from Brittany, and they actually originally went to Illinois. And then they moved from Illinois down to Louisiana. Now, back in the 1800s, there were a lot of French people that moved from France to Louisiana, and a lot of them ended up in St. Martinville. And St. Martinville was at one point called Le Petit Paris, the Little Paris. My great aunt, Soulier, and my grandmother, my father's mother, they spoke Parisian French. They did not speak Cajun French. In fact, at one time, Cajun was a derogatory term. Now it's not, of course, but now everybody wants to be Cajun. But it's interesting that we're from the Cajun country, but we're not officially what you would call Cajun. We're actually French. Also, I just want to add that in St. Martinville, I don't know if you've ever heard the story that Longfellow, William Wordsworth Longfellow wrote a poem called Evangeline. And a very famous poem, and it was based on apparently a true story of Evangeline and Gabriel, who were exiled from Nova Scotia. So they were put on ships, and the reason they were exiled because they would not convert to the Church of England. And some of them ended up in the Caribbean, and a lot of them ended up in Louisiana. And the story, the actual apparent story that happened, where Evangeline came to St. Martinville, she waited for her beloved Gabriel, and when he arrived, he was already married. So she died of a broken heart. Now that happened in St. Martinville, so where my father was from. And matter of fact, there they have this thing called the Evangeline Oak, which is supposed to be the oak that she sat under waiting for her beloved. So, and in St. Martinville also, when I was a kid, when you'd look in a phone book, there'd be pages and pages of Bienvenu. It was like Smith.
Very cool. I can't, I love the background of people's names, right? The history that comes out of it, the stories. Very cool. So tell us a little bit about childhood and what growing up was like.
Born and raised in New Orleans, lived uptown in the Maple Street area, which is the Riverbend area. So the Maple Street area is where we are. As a matter of fact, I'm still there. We sold our family home a few years ago, and I moved just 6 blocks away on the other side of the avenue, close to the river. And so I'm about 3 blocks from the Mississippi River. And so I've always lived, well, I've lived other places too, but when I've lived in New Orleans, I basically have, lived in this area. Although I did live near City Park at one time, but I like this area, and I'm very lucky to be able to find a really great apartment in what's called the Black Pearl. So then I went to Holy Name of Jesus School, which is connected with Loyola, which was run by the Mercy nuns at that time. Then I went to Christian Brothers School, which was in this huge mansion out in City Park. Christian Brothers took over this mansion and they turned it into a school. And City Park is a very beautiful park. So then after Christian Brothers, I went to De La Salle, which is uptown in this area, and that De La Salle was run by the Christian Brothers at that time, and it was just an all-boys school. So there's that, and then my father was a sailor, so we had a sailboat, and we used to sail a lot. And I got a sister and a brother. I'm the youngest in the family, and they still live here. I was the only one who basically lived other places, took off, and I lived in Spain and Los Angeles and Mobile, Washington State. I lived in Washington State for
quite
about
a while,
16 years, yeah.
Yeah. So youngest of 3, the only one who, for whatever reason, had that adventurous spirit to leave home, although you've come back, but you've had a lot of different stops along the way. Where do you think that sense of adventure came from for you? What were the influences?
I have no idea. I have no idea how I am like I am. I just don't know. I always like to investigate things. I don't like to take things at face value, even accepting, how people are supposed to live or believe. I just was always looking for adventure, whether that was actually physical adventure or actually exploring things or trying to understand things. When I was young, I was very fascinated with the filmmaking. I had determined that, well, first of all, I thought I was going to be an actor. And of course, that's, it didn't go very well. But but filmmaking always seemed to fascinate me. And I was a photographer when I was young. I was the guy behind the camera. I was the guy with the movie camera. so made a lot of family movies. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a filmmaker, and maybe I'll go into that, which I did. I went to USC Film School out at in Los Angeles and got a master's degree, and then I went to Spain. I thought I was going to get into the film industry there, and when I got there, the film industry was there was not a lot going on, and I realized I needed to speak Spanish, which I did not.
Still don't?
Oh, I do now.
You do now. Amazing. How did the opportunity to go to Spain come about?
Well, I had just graduated from USC Film School, and Ray, he was a friend of mine. He was working on a film that I had directed for school that won second place at Chicago Film Festival. And so he worked on the crew, and he would go back every year to Spain because he had an ex-wife and a daughter there. So he'd go back every year to visit them. And so he would say, "Come on, Richard, let's go to Spain. Give up your apartment. Just go to Spain." And I think, I can't do that. I just graduated from film school. I'm trying to find a job here. I actually had gotten an offer from a woman at Universal because she'd seen my student film, and she wanted me to come in and write a script, and they would let me direct it.
Wow.
So I'd come
That's
in with these ideas, and she didn't like it. And she said, let's go back. I want something more about what your student film was about, which is about this down-and-out boxer who'd become a professional wrestler, and he befriended this kid. But I didn't want to do that because I just did it,
Yeah, yeah.
So then Ray would ask me, "Come on, Richard, come on, let's go to Spain." So I can't. I got to do this. So he kept asking me. And so eventually I just said, "Oh, okay, why not?" Okay, what the hell? All right, I'll go to Spain. Why not?
I mean, it sounds. I get the practical, logical part of it. You can't just say yes, but it does sound like an easy invitation to accept. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, especially when my parents were expecting me to. Well, you got to work in the film industry now. So I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll go to Spain and I'll see about getting into the film industry there.
Yeah, fair enough. And I feel like we're really kind of getting to know your sense of adventure. Also, if we just ask you enough times, we could probably wear you down. A little bit about you. I don't know what you're like as your early aspirations as an actor. I don't know what your skill level is there, but I will say, I don't know how you didn't land a voice acting job. I think that's where you should be.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, having this radio show, people have mentioned that. After the first show, people were saying, "God, it sounds like you've been on the radio for years."
Yeah.
Well, I have had acting training, and I have appeared in, some plays when I was living in LA, and just plays, local plays, school at the community college I was teaching at. But also, I'm a singer.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a trained singer. So, that's just my voice,
Yeah.
So, and it was just a few years ago that I got hooked up with a guy who's a really great singer trainer, teacher, who actually lived over in Europe for many years. And he's a tenor, and he appeared with he'd been on stage with Domingo and what's that other guy? Pavarotti. He knew these guys. And so I started training with him and completely changed the way my voice is.
Interesting.
So not completely changed it, but just made it, my singing voice was a tremendous, improvement. And I'm a baritone.
That's great. So, I love learning about your creative side with film, with singing, with acting in your past. What was your first job? I mean, and going back, it doesn't have to be a professional job. It could be a part-time job as a teenager or.
My first job, I think that stands out as I worked in my father's office. He was a lawyer, worked downtown. He was a well-known insurance lawyer, civil lawyer. And so, yeah, that was my first.
Okay. And being the youngest of three, did your siblings, do that before you? Was that just you get to an age and that's what you're going to do?
No, I think I was the only one. I don't think my brother worked. My brother's a lawyer as well. No, I don't think my brother did that. So, and I've had like a ton of different jobs over the years.
So take us through some of that. You had this job at some point with your dad in the summers. You had this creative side. You went to film school and you theater and you've got your voice trained. Then you took off to Spain, but with the intention of trying to still make sure that you aligned with the education and the career goals that you had. So take us through some of that, some of the many jobs you've had, some of your career path.
Well, I worked when I was living in LA, I worked as a security guard. So I did that for a while. I still, I still kind of do that. I worked at the Jazz Fest last year. And then I also got another job working for, it's something called, I think that the term is a reader, where you work for a talent company and they would give you books and scripts to read, to say, okay, this is a book worth reading, this is a script worth reading or not reading. Mm-hmm. And most of the stuff that I was given was a slog getting through. They'd give me this book that apparently was a bestseller. I'd read it and it'd be really thick and it'd be like, oh my God, this is awful. I mean, I can't recommend this. And then, they give me these scripts that were awful. I remember there were one or two times that I'd recommend. And I remember one time they gave me a book that I really liked. And I just said, I like this book, but it'll never get made. It'll never get made. So I did that for a while. And of course, when I lived in Spain, I taught English as a second language. Before leaving LA, I was telling people I'm going to stay in Spain for a year. I'm going to work there. And my friend's going, no, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's going to come back. So we get over there and I'm there about a couple weeks and I'm thinking, you know what? I think I might go back.
Yeah.
So we go down to, I'm in Madrid and Ray shows me this postcard of these balconies in Seville with the blue sky and the balconies with the red flowers hanging over the side, whitewashed buildings. And I thought, I want to go there. He said, well, we're going there tomorrow. I said, okay, cool. So we go and I love Seville. But I'm still thinking, I don't have a job. I just go back. So we're in a pub and he happens to meet his friend, Bob Chipras, who had gone over to Spain with him, that they had gone to Spain to become bullfighters. So Ray tells us that, I got into the ring once with a bull and I thought, no, that's it. So he didn't do it. But Ray, his friend, actually became a bullfighter. Actually, there are pictures of him wearing the garb. He fought bulls. I don't think he did it for very long. But he became the dean of students at this Columbus International College, which was a college for, it was an American college that was connected with a college in Florida. So they're talking and Ray says to Bob, he says, my friend Richard here is looking for a job. And Ray goes, and Bob goes, just have him come in tomorrow and interview. So, okay. So I go in and this English woman who's married to this American sits me down. And I had a master's degree, right, for film production. So she sits me down, she talks to me, blah, 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 blah. And she says, okay, you're hired. So you're going to teach advanced students and you can teach one class of 12-year-olds, sixth graders. So I'm thinking, damn, it looks like I got to stay here now.
Yeah.
So
your friends were almost right that you weren't going to make it. And then,
it happened.
Yeah.
So So I got to meet a lot of Americans from Florida. So anyway, yeah. So Spain was great. I loved it. I was glad to get back home, but I loved because Spain, life is lived on the streets. People don't spend a lot of time in their houses. Different from here, where people spend their time in houses and inside. But
Yeah.
in Seville, it's out on the streets. People out walking, talking, getting a tapa, getting a little libation, sitting around, coffee shops,
Yeah.
or sitting in, and when I got, what's interesting is when I came back to the States, I actually had a culture shock coming back because I was so used to being with people, being out on the streets. They're these European cities, these old European cities are just designed differently from what we do in the States. A lot of these places in Spain, I guess it's other places too, these old cities, these big squares, these big squares that people go and at night or during the afternoon, and they just go in there and they walk around and they have coffee, they sit, have a little something to eat, and it's all, life lived on the streets.
Yeah.
So it was a little challenge getting used to that when I came back.
So you got to Seville, you got this job. How long did it last? Why did you come back? When?
The job lasted, I probably could have stayed indefinitely. But I came back, I was there for about a year, a little less than a year. And at that time, you could only communicate to the States using a phone, right?
Right.
Duh. No, we didn't have cell phones back then, right?
Yeah.
And there was no email and there was no texting.
Yeah.
So I had called my parents, and my parents said, "Richard, you need to come home." I said, "Why?" "We don't want to tell you, but you need to come home." I'm like, it said it has to do with your dad. I'm like, "Okay, tell me." So no, you come home and we'll tell you. So I was done I was there for 2 semesters. I taught advanced class. And the reason they taught me that I had the advanced class was because I didn't speak Spanish very well. So they couldn't communicate to me in Spanish. But it became like where they would be talking amongst themselves, and eventually I'd be understanding what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And then I'd reply in Spanish or whatever. Like, oh, I was surprised that I would. And so then anyway, so I was there for 2 semesters. I made a lot of friends, a lot of American friends. So then that was finished. I was finished teaching, went home, and then they told me that my father had cancer. Had something called multiple myeloma, which is the cancer of the bone marrow.
Yeah.
And they only gave him 6 months to live, and he lived 4 years. And he kept working. He was working up until like the last week that he died.
Wow.
So, and I was there in the house when he passed. And the same with my mom, who lived to 103. I was there in the same room when she passed. So that to me was a privilege that I was able to be there.
Absolutely. Well, it's a privilege. It's a good reason to go home. Working until a week before, do you think, was that just kind of, it kept him going? Was it love and passion for his work?
He loved being a lawyer. He loved what he was doing. And I remember he was in bed, still working. He knew it was toward the end, but he just kept working. Yeah, and he was pretty functional, went sailing, would take trips.
Wow. Good. So your family stayed based in, I don't know if I feel like I'm going to start to change my pronunciation as we continue to talk, but they were based in New Orleans. You at some point took yourself out to Washington. When did that happen? What was the impetus? What did you go to do there?
When I came back to New Orleans, I went back out to Los Angeles. And, knowing that my father was fairly healthy, even though he had this problem. So I went out to Los Angeles, looking for the possibility, maybe trying to get back in the film industry. And I don't know, it didn't work out. So I just came back to New Orleans and stayed here for 4 years. I lived with my parents for a couple of years, and I lived with another friend in an apartment for a couple of years. And then I had a friend of mine from LA called me and said, I have an option. I want to take an option on this book, and I wonder if you could put up some money for it. So I said, okay. So I put up some money to option this book. It didn't really work out the way I thought it was going to work out. And so I had some friends that I'd made in Mississippi and also from New Orleans who were moving up to Washington State to do this back to the land kind of thing. So I thought, oh, okay, what the hell? Sorry. Okay. So I wasn't going up there alone. There were other people who were going to be up there. So I moved up there, and so at one point, I was performing sometimes in this little coffee shop, and singing voice and guitar,
and playing? Yeah.
And so then I met this woman who was actually heckled me during one of my performances.
Uh-oh.
And so then we got into a relationship. I mean,
the obvious end to that.
Obvious, yeah. So then I bought a house out there, and she moved in, and we decided that she kind of decided that we wanted to have our own place. It wasn't, a place that was mine and she was moving into, so I thought, okay. So then it was like, okay, let's find our own place where we can do our own thing. So we found south of, we were in Yelm at the time. And so south of Yelm, we found 65 acres. We looked all over the place for the right land. We'd go somewhere and she goes, this is the place. And I go, this is not the place. And we go to another place and she said, this is the place. This isn't the place. So we were driving up this road to the top of this little hill, and it was open. It was woods all around. It was open, totally open, like this big open field. And I got out and I said, this is the place. And she's like, yeah, you're right. This is the place. So we built a house that faced the sun, and we did the alternative energy thing. I had solar panels. I had a seasonal creek that produced amazing power. This little tiny creek. And we also had a hybrid system, which means we had a generator as well that we used when it was overcast. So we were there for about 3 years until it all fell apart.
Okay.
So then eventually I moved back to, then I lived for about 10 years in Vancouver, Washington, and made a couple of CDs of some of my original piano music, and also with another singer. She had written some great songs. We got together and produced one of our own CDs. And then at some point I was like, you know what? Because what would happen is I would go back home like once or twice a year, and every time I'd come home, it got harder and harder to leave.
Yeah.
Because of family and my mom and that kind of thing. And I was missing the South. I was missing, like, we have palm trees here, and we have, winds off the Gulf of, what's called the Gulf of America now, but back then it was the Gulf of Mexico. And so we'd have these winds, these balmy breezes, and you didn't have that up in the Northwest. It would be chilly at night, and I was used to, not chilly at night, big night, because here, even though it might be hot during the day, the nights can be actually rather pleasant. If you got a nice breeze, it's rather pleasant. So I was missing that. I was missing it. And of course my mom wanted me to move home. Right. So I remember when I finally decided to do it, because, where I was living, Vancouver, Washington, it's there in the lowlands. It's by Portland, Oregon. It's about an hour or so away from the ocean. And the scenery, I was right by the Columbia River Gorge, just beautiful, beautiful places. I'd go camping a lot, and so I'm thinking I must be crazy to leave all this stuff. This is just so beautiful. I got friends, et cetera, et cetera. And so finally I made the choice. I said, I'm moving home. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm moving home. And she was like, "Oh, thank God. I'm so glad you're coming home. Oh, thank you. Thank you." And I tell you what, once I made that decision, I was done. I was done.
Yeah.
I got rid of a lot of stuff. I packed up my car. When I drove away, I didn't turn around. I went back I've been back a couple of times, but I don't miss it. What's curious, though, is that a lot of my dreams are set in Washington State.
Isn't that interesting?
And I think it has to do with the fact that the landscape is so dynamic. Here in New Orleans, it's just flat. Yeah, so those are what my dreams, not all of my dreams, but a lot of them are still set in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Well, you knew it was time to go home. It felt like home that you wanted to go back to, but you still have a beautiful landscape in your mind that you get to visit in your sleep.
And now for a word from our sponsors. Ready to share your stories and life philosophy, or capture those of a parent or grandparent? Or maybe a corporate package is right for you to build connection across your workforce and add value to your clients. Visit audiolife.io today to learn more. Our listeners will get 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. AudioLife, where memories find their voice.
So what was returning home like this time? You talked about coming back from Spain and almost having a bit of culture shock. What was it like this time? And did you notice changes and evolutions in the city?
I can't pinpoint any changes or evolutions in the city. I did love the weather. The thing about living in the Northwest, on the western side of the Cascades, when I first moved there, it was a time when it wasn't very rainy. So I thought, what is everybody complaining about? It's not very rainy here. And then as time went on, it started getting more and more rainy. So there'd be times when you wouldn't see the sun for weeks. You would see the sun sometimes, but just before it set, it would peek from underneath the clouds. It was almost like it was taunting you,
Yeah.
And then it would set. And so it would be drizzly, not really rainy, but just drizzly. And you'd go into people's houses and they didn't turn up their heat, and so I was ready.
Yeah.
I was ready to get back into being from the South. And what's interesting, New Orleans is the northern shore of the Caribbean, the northern coast of the Caribbean. We are not really a southern town, even though we're in the deep South.
Yeah.
New Orleans is its own island. And literally, New Orleans is an island. People don't really realize that. We're sitting on an island because we're surrounded by water. And one of the advantages of that, New Orleans cannot expand.
Right.
Like some of these places in Texas or up in, Oregon or Washington, they just keep expanding and expanding. We're limited by space. We can't expand, which is, I think very fortunate. People like living in old houses, like buying old houses and fixing them up. So we have a lot of old housing stock here that keeps getting bought and refurbished. People love the fact that we have not really modernized. We still have streetcars I'm a block and a half away from a streetcar line. We still have streetcars. And these streetcars are antiques. They're well-maintained antiques, but people like riding the streetcars. Even locals who ride the streetcars. You find a lot of tourists riding the streetcars, and I talk about that in the book, about riding a streetcar.
Yeah.
But I love riding a streetcar. And it used to be years and years ago, there were streetcars that went all around the city. You could hop in the streetcar and travel all around the city in a streetcar. Now we just have 2 streetcar lines. Well, really 3. They so we've added a couple streetcar lines, They don't go very far, but they're useful. So, and years ago, the Canal Street streetcar line was removed because they were saying, like a lot of these, car companies were saying, well, it's modern. We got to get the bus. The bus is more modern. And so they ripped up the streetcar lines on Canal Street. And these streetcar lines are the oldest streetcar lines in the world. St. Car streetcar line is the oldest in the world. So they ripped up the streetcar line on Canal Street and they put in buses. And when they did that, the whole tenor of Canal Street in downtown changed. They lost a lot of really great department stores, a lot of touristy kind of places started coming in. And then right before Katrina, so they'd been off the St. Canal Street for about 40 years. And right before Katrina, they reopened the Canal Street streetcar line. Now with a spur that went out to City Park, which they didn't have before. And that's started to change things. So, so I like the streetcars. I like the old traditional stuff. I'm very much into modern stuff. I mean, I got a computer, blah, blah, blah. I know how to do all this stuff, right? Yeah. But I like all the old traditional stuff. I talk a lot about in my book about most of the places that I recommend to eat and some of the restaurants, and some of the places to stay are old places that have stood the test of time. And these are places that locals go.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I wanted to do in my book is that these are the places that locals go. Yeah, so it's a very limited selection that I have in my book. It's not one of these big, thick tour guides that are written by people not from the place that write.
Yeah. There's definitely kind of the insider view of somebody who lives there, who is sharing, in some cases history, in some cases local secrets, maybe not very secret, but local places. You take us through some of the slang and some of the terms. I found it very, very digestible, like very easy to navigate. So, in the title, you say the 7 things that you must do, and you do have these 7 sections, which actually start from almost necessities, right? So you start with with shelter, with being in the French Quarter, but also the different hotels and boutique hotels and places you can stay. You move into food, which was a very fun section to go through for me. Even though I'm not planning the trip, I get to kind of go there in my mind a little bit. You move into. Plan a trip. I know. Well, yeah. I think what's happening is I am planning a trip. I just didn't know I was going to. Okay. I think that's what's happening. I will let you know when I get there. I have been, our common friend Joe, who connected us. I have been thinking about hitting him up to force me to do a trip sooner than I expected. So I hope that happens.
So did reading the book have anything to do with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really great to hear.
Joe is, absolutely loves. So he's been there a couple years now. Moved from Southern California, and he's in heaven. He enjoys every festival, every bit of food, every cocktail, everything that he can do there. All of the great friends that he's met. And despite him telling me, every week or two about the amazing things that he's doing and did on the weekend, I haven't had that. He keeps saying, "Oh, one of these days, we're gonna plan a trip." And until I read your book, I hadn't had that push. I was just
really?
We'll do that at some point, Joe. I get it, but until I read your book, and then I was like, I haven't done that, or I have done that and want to go back. So yeah, definitely. Really, really enjoyed that. I learned, you've just shared with us, but I learned that it was the oldest streetcar line in the world. Did not know that. So lots of tips there. And then, you talk through museums that I haven't been to and want to now. The music I have, I've done as much as I could. You take us through the markets. And then there's a few extra things at the end, which, tell me when. So this has been updated as of 2025. When did you first write it? And what drove you to write it?
It came out in 2014. It was the first edition, and then I updated it, I think, in 2020. So I was in Greece.
Ooh,
right?
Nice. Okay.
And I had this big, thick book. Tour book. So, and I'd gotten off the plane in Athens, and then I went to these offices called the tourist police. So you can go into the tourist police office and you can get guidance about places to go and that kind of thing. So I'm in the tourist police. I got my book out, and these 2 girls come up to me and say, "Can we look at your book?" So I was like, "Sure." We're from Chicago. I said, oh, okay, great. So they're looking through the book, and they said, and we were talking, and they said, we're going out to one of the islands. We're going to go to one of the islands tomorrow. Would you like to go with us?
Sounds like
okay,
fun.
Well, I'm going to stop at the first island there, but I'll ride the ferry with you. I'll go with you, spend time with you all tonight. So we, got together. We found a pension down at the heart of Athens. We were able to get like a 3-bed place, a little room. So we all kind of slept in the same room. And so then we went out, we got on the ferry the next morning, and I was determined to get off at the first island. But they were going to go all the way to Santorini. And I don't know if you know what Santorini is, but usually the shots that you see of Greece, with a boat in the background, you see like the white little thingies or whatever, that's Santorini. That is like the ideal. That's like the ideal Greece thing. So we're going along, and they kept saying, "Why don't you come with us to Santorini?" So I want to go to this first place. Maybe I'll come join you later. So we get to the first island, and I'm like, I think I'm just going to go with them. Santorini. I'm like, okay, I'll come with you to Santorini. And they were like, yes. So we got there, and we found a place, and we were able to get one room that had 3 beds, and we just had a great old time. And then we found a place right on in another place on Santorini. It had different little villages on Santorini. It's a big island. So we found a place that we were there for a week. There were 3 beds in there. There was a patio. We'd sit out on the patio and we'd drink, what do they call them? Vodka and grapefruit juice. So I know this is kind of a long-winded story about how I wrote the book. But the thing is that, this book, this big giant guide that I had, it has too many choices and little bitty words, and not written by locals. They're written by people who visited there. Probably they never even visited the place that they're talking about. So then I thought, you know what? I'm going to write. I don't know when I made a decision. Sometime in 2013, maybe I made a decision. I'm going to write a tour guide that's about New Orleans, that is limited in its scope, written by a local. So that's what I did. And so the first version was only 99 pages. And then I updated it in 2020, and I added a few more pages. So they're like 116 pages. So I thought, well, I'm going to add a few more pages to this one. So I'm using this program that Amazon provides. And let me tell you, if it were not for Amazon, there'd be a lot of people who have published books now who would not be able to publish them. What Amazon did was tremendous. I know a lot of people have problems with Amazon, blah, 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 blah. What they've done for authors is tremendous. Authors don't have to go through publishing houses or publishing companies. They can publish it themselves. Matter of fact, there was a guy who wrote a book called Red Planet or something about Mars that had Matt Damon. They made a movie about it. He wrote that and published it on Amazon, and somebody read it and thought this would be a great movie. That would not have happened. So they provide a really great program to, publish a book. So after I had written all this stuff, and so then I go to publish it as a paperback, and it's like 166 pages. I'm like, oh my God. I didn't want it to be that long, but I don't know. I think some of the stuff I've added into it has made it a lot more interesting. I've added things like the words that we say and how we pronounce certain things, and other little tidbits and that kind of stuff. So, I haven't added a lot more choices. I have with a few things, but it's a lot of the stuff is like local, flavory kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think it's, I didn't see the earlier versions, but even at 166 pages, I mean, it's really easy to navigate, to jump around. It's very digestible, but you're also getting you're getting some really nice recommendations that are easy to get excited about. You're getting a little bit of history. You're just getting a bit of the local perspective too. So again, for those joining on YouTube, I'll just show you the cover, but we'll add links in the show notes, whether you're local, whether you're planning to travel, or like me, you weren't planning to travel, but you might be after you read it. I recommend it for anybody, and whether you've been or not. So I'm somebody who has been to the city a few times. Some of what's in the book jumped out as fun reminders or places that I had wanted to try that I haven't, but there's a lot in there that that I'll add on my next trip now that I've had a chance to go through. So again, it's called Your Personal New Orleans Tour, 7 Things You Must Do to Have a Fabulous Time in the Crescent City. Richard, why is it called the Crescent City?
It's called the Crescent City because the city is built on the crescent of the Mississippi River. And what's interesting, right out in front of the city, the old city, which is French Quarter, the river runs north because the river snakes all over the place. So even though we are on the east bank of the river, we are actually west. How can I explain this? So the west bank of New Orleans is on the other side of the river, but it's actually east of the city, but it's the west bank because it's the west bank of the river.
Okay, so west bank of the river, but it
because of the way that the
zigzags,
river because of the way that the river snakes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have a radio show as well. How long have you been doing it? How did that come about?
The radio show I have is called Completely New Orleans. I have a website that I've been working on called Completely New Orleans. So it's on WGSO and 990 on your radio dial. And also, if you want to listen to the podcast, you can go to WGSO.com and click the podcast and listen to some past shows. I started in April. And a fellow named Jeff Cruer, who is a relatively nationally known commentator, he has a show on WGSO, and he's had it for like 15 years, called Politics with a Punch. And he kind of knows my family. And a friend of mine, Gary, who I know from, I'm in a Mardi Gras crew, and I'm in a dancing group in the Mardi Gras crew, and Gary founded this group, and he still dances in it.
Okay.
He bought into the radio station. And so he, at one point, had said, maybe you should do a radio show. And I thought, I'll think about it. And so one day, Jeff Cruer calls me and said, I want to talk with you about doing a radio show. So I thought, okay. So I met with him and I said, and so we were talking, and I said, what would my show be about? And he picked up my book and said, it's about this. So basically what the show, it's an hour-long show. It's at 5 o'clock on Mondays. And what I do is I interview people. I just interview local people, friends of mine, politicians, people who own, businesses and that kind of thing. So I like doing it. It's fun. I have a good friend, Chadwick GPT, who is my co-producer. I don't know if anybody got that, but he's my co-producer, and I'm telling you, I don't know if I could do this show without that.
Yeah,
I really don't. For example, I was interviewing Joe Giarrusso, who is a councilman who's retiring, from his position in about 6 months. So I just went on and I said, okay, I'm doing this interview. I'm Joe Giarrusso, blah blah blah. And it came up with all these questions, and it knew about this guy. It knows about all the things that he's supported, et cetera, et cetera. So why not use it?
Yeah.
Of course, there are my own questions I want to ask, but why not use it? I think it's a tremendous boon to content creators. I mean, I don't believe so. Just for the record, I did not use Chadwick to write my book.
Okay, good.
And I will not.
Good note. In 2014, Chadwick wasn't on your team yet, so yeah.
But I mean, in the recent edition, I did not either, and I will not do that for this.
Yeah. But as a research assistant, as a producer who's just helping you collect background and plan,
absolutely, yes,
yeah,
I find it invaluable. Yeah,
yeah. So okay. We've been talking about New Orleans. There are a couple of things that you've brought up that we can't have this show without talking about. One, Mardi Gras. Well, actually, let's start there. Okay, so Mardi Gras is probably what people who have or haven't been have heard about the city. What do they need to know? What's it really like?
Okay, well, Mardi Gras is the greatest free show on earth.
Awesome.
That is what it's been touted as, and it is true. So, what a lot of people's idea of Mardi Gras, a lot of it you get from the news media, and they focus on Bourbon Street, and which is not, I mean, it's a part of Mardi Gras, but it's only like, God, maybe 5% of what Mardi Gras is about. You know, they focus on all the debauchery and rowdiness, blah, blah, blah. And what's interesting is you can go down to the French Quarter. Like, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to take my kids to Mardi Gras. That's like a mistake. Mardi Gras is great for kids. So you don't take them on Bourbon Street, of course, but you can take them to the French Quarter. You'll see on Mardi Gras Day, you'll see families down there all dressed in the same costumes. They might have a wagon that they've dressed up to look like a float, and they'll pull it through, the French Quarter. They will avoid Bourbon Street. What a lot of people don't realize is that these crews, and they spell Krewe, we call them crews, who put on these Mardi Gras parades, they pay for the entire thing. It's not sponsored by the city. Matter of fact, they have to pay the city a certain amount of money because they got to have the cops, out there. But they pay for the entire thing, and there's no corporate sponsorship is allowed. So you will not see, like in some other places around the country or even around the world, a float that's advertising something. These crews, a lot of the crews, like I'm in a crew, and it's a very satirical crew, and I'm in the dancing group, and I've been in it for like 15 years. And each year we have different theme for our group. The last one we did for Mardi Gras was our P. Diddy theme. And so, yeah. And the year before we did Taylor Swift. We're all dressed as Swifties. So the place to go when you bring your kids, you can certainly bring them in the Quarter. But the place to go would be on St. Charles Avenue is where we have, most of the people that come to see the parades hang out. And there be ladders along the way that kids can get up on the ladder, and they throw stuff off the floats. A lot of people don't realize that since the 1800s, we've been throwing stuff off the floats. Throws. Beads, cheap beads, doubloons, which are these little coin-like things, all little trinkets, all kind of different things that they throw off the floats. So the parades start about 2 weeks before actual Mardi Gras. And, so there's a parade like every night and somewhere around the city. Mardi Gras officially starts, carnival season, I should say, officially starts on 12th night, which is January 6th. And it's when we have our first little parade where these people call themselves the Funny 40 Fellows. They get onto 3 streetcars with a band on each car, and they're all dressed up. And the streetcar goes down Carrollton Avenue to St. Charles Avenue, rides all the way downtown. And they throw stuff off the streetcar. Their band is playing. They're drinking. They're having a good old time. So that's really when Mardi Gras officially starts. And that's when we start having our king cake. So yeah, don't pay attention to what the news media tells you about Mardi Gras. It's all fake. It's all blown up way out of proportion.
Amazing. So, there are so many things from the book, from the experience I want to ask you about. We're going to leave a lot of that in the book for people to discover. So I'm not going to go through everything I'd want to ask, but a couple, you mentioned Katrina earlier on. We've talked a little bit about the geography. You are prone, geographically, you're prone to hurricanes. Were you local when Katrina happened?
Yeah, I came back in like 2003, and I actually got a job teaching English as a second language at a language school here, and which I had done in Spain. I also did that when I lived in the Portland area. So Katrina was in 2005, And I'd come home and was staying with my mom and our family home. I stayed with her until she passed away. And, I helped take care of her. She was very lucid. She had to use a walker, but she was very, she did great up until the last couple months when she fell. So I'd come back. In years past, when a hurricane would come, nobody would leave. So it was Friday evening and we were watching the Weather Channel, and it showed where the hurricane was, right? Below us, heading right for us. So we're like, okay, well, we'll see. So I got up the next morning and I looked at the Weather Channel, and there was this mass of white twirling clouds stretching from Texas to Florida. And I'm like, let's get out of here. So we packed up enough clothes for 3 days. Yeah. And then we got in our car and we drove to Baton Rouge, to my uncle's place in Baton Rouge. We were in a gated community. And so the next day they called for evacuations, which was a nightmare. I'm so glad that we left early. It was a nightmare getting out because the roads were all tied up, people creeping along. It was a blessing. It was a tremendous blessing that we were able to leave earlier. Everybody thought it was going to be 3 days. And well, what was supposed to be 3 days came to months. And everybody left all their stuff in the fridge. That was probably more than anything else. It was the refrigerator having to deal. And we had just stuffed the freezer full of all these wonderful Omaha steaks and some other things.
And so despite being in the fridge and freezer, you would have lost power. It would have been sitting there for months and months And
it was for some people who didn't come back or came back later. So I got back within the first week.
Okay.
And there was a curfew, so you had to get in, and the curfew was at 6:00 or whatever. So I drove back with a friend, went into the house, and went to got some stuff, because I had gone to Goodwill actually to get some clothes,
Yeah.
And so it was the end of the first week. Got into the house, and the phone rings.
Okay.
And I forget who it was, somebody we knew, and I answered the phone. I was like, wow, the phone works. So we got some stuff and some clothes or whatever. And there were these, I think what they call them is coffin flies or little fruit flies or something all over the refrigerator. And of course I opened the refrigerator and it's dripping, all kinds of stuff,
Maybe some odor.
Yeah, it was stunk. And so I determined I was going to get these big plastic bags, throw everything in the plastic bag and bring it out in the backyard and just throw it out in the backyard, just let it sit there in a pile. There's nothing else to do. I mean, because it would just rotted, made it would have worse inside the house.
Yeah.
And so we did that. And by the time I left, there were already these big black giant flies that had found this big pile of black plastic bags full of rotting food. And so then we went back, and don't know when we got back in. It was a while. Okay. And so my mom bought a condo up there in the same place that my uncle was. There was one available, so we did that. We stayed there for three months, came back before Christmas, and tried to clean the fridge. Couldn't do it.
Just put it in the backyard and let somebody else deal with it.
I cleaned it, spotless, but it just would not work right again.
Yeah.
And so then a little while later, there was a Christmas party. It might have been the next year. There was a Christmas party at a couple of neighbors down. And we were talking about Katrina. And at one point they said, yeah, there was this awful smell in the neighborhood. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And I said, that was a big pile in the backyard of our rotten food. So yeah, that was me. That was us.
Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah.
And despite all the all the news coverage that, that was out there, that these are the stories that the locals will share that was not covered. I hadn't heard that perspective, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, you drive down the street and you'd see refrigerators all sealed up because nobody wanted to open it.
Ugh.
We just see, and it would be like funny things written on it, or little quotes or whatever, with the faces or whatever it was. People tried to be as funny, as humorous as possible dealing with this.
In those situations, you have to, right?
Yeah.
And was your what was your house in good condition? What was it like the roadways? Were you able to what kind of damage did you see, and were you able to get in there?
The roadways seem to be okay, because we always have problems here with potholes, with damaged streets. Back years ago when there'd be a hurricane, people would be out cutting branches and moving stuff, but that didn't happen because nobody was here.
Right.
So there was a lot of cleanup that had to happen.
Yeah.
Because neighbors were not doing it because they weren't here. And so the only damage that we had was the roof. There were some shingles that were pulled off the roof that were missing. We didn't have any other kind of damage. And so we replaced the roof. We did have damage the year after that when there was a tornado that came down our street, which tornadoes within the city of New Orleans is so rare. I don't even know when it happens. But this one started across the river. It jumped from across the river and came right down the street, down our neighborhood, right down our street. We had a pine tree that snapped in half, that missed the house by inches. Oh, and it was at 3:00 in the morning. I was in bed and I was awakened by this horrible sound. I didn't know what it was. It's a horrible sound. And so I jumped out of bed, and as I got through my bedroom door, the windows blew in and sent shards of glass all over the room, all in my bed, stuck in the wall. And we had like 6 or 7 windows that were broken by this tornado.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we had this, and in the backyard, all the lawn furniture was pushed together in a pile. And then we have the shed in the back, and I looked at the shed, and I think it was okay. And then a couple of days later, I walk into the shed, and I look, where's all this light coming from it? I look up, the roof was gone.
Oh my gosh.
And so at that Christmas party that we talked about, I was talking about that, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, your roof landed in our backyard."
They found your roof, okay?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, we wondered where that came from.
Wow. So a few of the realities of living where you do, I mentioned earlier that there's so much in this book I would love to ask you about. We're going to save a lot of it for our listeners to read and discover themselves. What's 1 or 2 tips, bits of advice that you as the author would pick out that you'll, just a sneak peek into what's in here?
Well, if I were coming to New Orleans and it was like your first time, I would definitely try to stay in the quarter. If not the quarter, someplace close to the quarter. I recommend, the Roosevelt Hotel, which is just a block from the quarter. And I also recommend the, what's that English style hotel? Windsor Court. That's a beautiful hotel. Now, if you don't want to stay in the quarter, because the quarter can get kind of lively and maybe too lively for some people, there are a couple places along St. Charles Avenue that I talk about in the book. And there's one place that's actually very close to me, and it's right there by Audubon Park. It's called the Parkview Guest House. And that has been here for over 100 years. In 1884, there was a World Cotton Exposition in Audubon Park. It wasn't Audubon Park at the time. There was a World Cotton Exposition, and they built the largest building in the world there at the time. Now the largest building in the world is the Superdome here. And one of the structures that they built, well, I don't know if maybe it was privately built, was this Parkview Guest House that was not actually on the grounds of the exposition. It was a World's Fair. But it was right next to Audubon Park. It's on a corner right there on St. Charles Avenue and Walnut Street. And it was built as a guest house, and it's still a guest house, and it's furnished like it was back in those days. The rooms are beautiful, beautifully furnished, modern bathrooms. They got Wi-Fi, they got the whole thing. And they got a little bar there that just opened a few years ago called the Gilded Perch. You can go there. You don't have to even be you can be just a visitor. I mean, you can be a local and go there. Sit on the porch, watch streetcars go by. That would be another place I'd recommend. There are a couple other places I recommend in the book, but I like this place. It just feels good to me.
Yeah.
So I would definitely, I talk about this in the book, and this is one of my favorite places in the world. And it's the Napoleon House. It's in the Quarter. It's on Chartres in St. Louis. And this was a place, it's a 2-story place. This was bought for Napoleon Bonaparte. The plan was that they were going to rescue him from, I forget what island he was at, St. Helena, another island. They were going to rescue him from that island and bring him to New Orleans. And so that's the history of the place. And it's a bar restaurant, so you can bring the kids there. In New Orleans, if a restaurant has a bar, you can bring the kids. If the bar serves food, you can bring your kids. So it's a bar restaurant that's old as can be. They don't paint the walls. Paint is peeling off the walls. They serve great local food, New Orleans food, at really, really great prices. Probably the cheapest place you can get in the Quarter. There's a great patio you can go on you can eat from. I like going on the patio. And the waiters and waitresses are dressed in black, white shirts, black pants. Some of them wear a bow tie. And they always play classical music in the background. And that's my favorite place. I love Napoleon House.
Amazing. Well, you can read more. You can hear Richard on his radio show as well. Richard, if people want to, just kind of a reminder, if people want to learn more or connect with you, what's the best way to do it?
Well, I'm going to give you all a website that you can go to that I recommend. I say at the very beginning of the book, I say, go here to get your bonus thing for buying this book.
I saw that.
Okay, so I'm going to give that website out now. Awesome. Even though you haven't bought the book, you can get a free audio version of the book. It's not the Audible version. It's just a plain, MP3 version of the book. And there are a couple of things on there. There's like a chapter that I didn't put in the book, and also there's a recipe book. So you go to yournolatour.com, and just give me your email and your name, and I will be contacting you that way.
Perfect. Very, very cool. Good. And then, just that very back page there gives you some links to the 2 CDs that Richard mentioned. I think there's a link here to the short film as well. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Amazing. Well, as I said, you've been very generous with your time. If we had more time, I'd keep picking your brain and learning more from you. But is there anything that you really wanted to share on today's show that I haven't asked you about yet?
Okay, so if you don't like the heat, don't come to New Orleans in the summertime.
Yeah.
Although we do have air conditioning. And we also have a lot of different festivals that happen in the summertime here. Come in the fall or the spring. The wintertime's okay. Christmas time's a good time to come as well. Because it's very beautiful, a lot of stuff that happens around Christmas. So, if you don't like the heat, don't come in the summer. But as I said, we're air conditioned, so there's a lot of things that happen. So,
awesome. Good advice. Fair advice. Again, you can read more in Richard's book. You can check out his radio show. You can check out the website links that he has shared that we're going to share in the show notes as well. Richard, thank you for being very open, very sharing great advice and insight, and again, just being very generous with your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And for everybody listening, it's been another episode of the AudioLife podcast. I've been your host today, Carrie Purcell, joined by guest Richard Bienvenu. And if you like what you heard today, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review and subscribe so you never miss a show. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another story for you.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.